So I've got a short presentation. Well, I don't know how short it'll be because I haven't run through it, but it's pretty short. It's pretty shallow on using OpenVPN. And OpenVPN is an open source VPN let's skip a few slides ahead here since I'm totally discombobulated here. Okay, so what do we get with OpenVPN? OpenVPN is an open source software package that lets us do virtual private networking. There are many different ways to do virtual private networking. You could just do PPP over Telnet and you'd get virtual private networking. But you wouldn't get things like authentication or encryption, which OpenVPN has built into it. OpenVPN has multiple connection channels. We can connect through TCP, UDP. UDP is the best choice because that mimics a physical network. Because on a physical network like Ethernet, there's really no connections. And it's the same with UDP. It's just packets going across. There's no guarantee if they're going to make it there or not. And so we let the higher level protocols worry about that kind of stuff. OpenVPN is open source, but it's one of those open source projects that has a commercial company behind it. So there are commercial support options, and there's an enterprise version of OpenVPN, like several packages in the open source world. But perhaps the biggest selling point of OpenVPN is that it's cross-platform. Like I said, we could run a VPN pretty effectively with just PPP over Telnet or PPP over SSH. But you're going to have to set that up on every machine. And, how are you going to do it on Windows? How are you going to do it on Mac? Well, OpenVPN is standardized across all the platforms, and it's available for all these different platforms. I'm just looking at the OpenVPN Wikipedia page, and it lists a lot of platforms, all the ones you'd expect: Solaris, all the Unix likes, QNX, Mac OS X, Windows, everything. And there's also a bunch of third-party clients for OpenVPN. So OS X. I run OpenVPN on OpenWRT on my home router, and so that's pretty neat that you can do that. An Android client. As you can see, tons of different clients. Let me show you OpenVPN's webpage. It's at www.openvpn.net. And usually what you're going to want to do is go to the community software link and go to documentation. That's where all the good info is. So I'm jumping around here in my presentation. How do VPN software packages like OpenVPN work? Well, if you're at my last presentation, you probably remember this picture here. And it is just saying that down here at the bottom we have our entire frame. This is an Ethernet frame. And inside this frame we have some IP data, an IP header, and inside that is UDP, and inside that is actual data. Well, let's look at the data. Well, there's no reason we couldn't fit an entire other packet inside this data payload. And this is not unlike the way you could fit a car on a ferry and ferry it across this canal here. So this ferry is kind of creating like a virtual private road across this canal. You've got vehicles inside vehicles. So I guess the canal is our untrusted network and the road is our network. So when you run OpenVPN, basically what it gives you is a virtual network interface on the local side and on the remote side. And this virtual network interface can either be a tune device or a tap device. I say tune, but it's short for tunnel. Tap is short for ether tap. So a tunnel gives you IP connectivity. It works at layer 2. You have to do IP routing, so you have to set up the routing tables and the routes. And it's just like being able to connect through a network like the internet. You've got your default routes and you route through them. A tap device is like a virtual Ethernet device. And the way you would connect this virtual Ethernet device to your remote network or your local network is through bridging. You'd create a virtual bridge. Linux can do this pretty easily, and you connect your real Ethernet device and your virtual Ethernet device. And it's exactly like being plugged into the same Ethernet switch. This is nice to do if you've got a network and you're already running DHCP on it and you want the remote client to be just like it's on the network. You also might be running some protocol besides IP. I don't think anyone runs any other protocols besides IP anymore, like IPX or AppleTalk or some other kind of legacy protocol. But most of the time, it's better to use a tunnel device because there's less overhead. You don't have to send the Ethernet frame across the network. It's just the IP part. But the downside of using a tunnel device is that broadcast packets won't get through because you're actually not on the same network segment. You're actually routing packets through the IP routers. So let's look at one scenario. This is probably what most people are interested in. This is just how would we connect a remote client, we'll say like a laptop, over an untrusted network to some other network that we already have. And this untrusted network, it could be the internet, or it could be like a wireless network. If you don't trust WEP and you don't trust WPA, you might just want to run OpenVPN to connect over your own Wi-Fi network. And because VPN has bulletproof strong encryption, and it's pretty easy to run. I was going to do this example on my virtual machine, but instead what I'll do is I'll just let you peek at my working configuration that I have on this laptop right here that I use to connect to my virtual private network. So I use a tap device. I don't know why, I just like the idea of it being a virtual network switch, and then I can run DHCP on it. So on my laptop's called Cub. I have an OpenVPN configuration file that I'll let you look at. I have it somewhere. Okay, here's my OpenVPN configuration file. We're going to see a lot of OpenVPN configuration files. Okay, it's basically saying look for all of our stuff relative to the OpenVPN directory. Not sure what mute means. We're going to connect to a remote server at this IP address and this port. We're going to use UDP. Can't remember what no bind means. LZO compression. We're going to use a tap device. This option here, persist tune, this is going to make OpenVPN not destroy the tap device when OpenVPN exits. This is important when you're running OpenVPN as a regular user, because it actually can't bring down the tap device because it no longer has root privileges. Okay, it's going to be a client. TLS client says that we're using encryption, some other encryption. When you're doing OpenVPN, you can run it without encryption, and you can use like rudimentary password encryptions, and you can use shared secret keys. But the best way to do encryption is to generate a private key and a certificate for every client and every server. And the way that you do that is through, there's a little how-to on the OpenVPN. Let's see here. I'm not going to do it here because I've already got all my keys generated, and frankly it's kind of a hassle because you just have to type in all the names and you have to run a script for each one you're going to create. But let's see if I can get the how-to pulled up here, because it's pretty good. Okay, so when you install OpenVPN, you know OpenVPN is probably included with whatever distribution you're already using. It's going to give you this easy RSA directory inside the documentation directory. And so I just want you to run this script, and so you're going to build a certificate authority. And the certificate authority is going to let you sign all the keys and make them legit keys. Okay, this is a little bit more involved how-to. Let me get the really easy how-to. Okay, I think it's just this regular how-to here.